Hello everyone! Welcome back to LoFi History. We took a break. We went on a little bit of an adventure last time into the franchise of Star Wars with Matt House at our usual LoFi History time, and because of our summer slowdown this summer, we are going to an every other Tuesday format. So here we are, lovely Tuesday afternoon with Glen and Marie. And of course, I am Libba, and if this is your first time joining us, then this is your opportunity to ask historians Glen and Marie any question that you like in the chat. So, I see we've already got Bobble with us on Twitch. Hey Bobble, good to see you again. We are streaming on Twitch, on YouTube, and Facebook, so that's where we're going to be gathering our questions today. Now, as usual, I also wanted to let everyone know that we are working toward our May donation goal. So far, we've got $80 toward it. We're trying to make it to $200. And one of the cool things about this May donation goal is that we are going to raffle off a really cool book. I'm going to show a graphic of it right now. Yes. So we are raffling off a copy of Southern Food and Civil Rights, Feeding the Revolution by Frederick Douglass Opie. And this goes into how recipes of the civil rights era, as well as recipes that activists would have made for the groups of other activists during marching, during peaceful protests, etc. So a really fascinating look into the civil rights era, and really, really yummy recipes to go along with it. So if you would like to donate to our to that raffle and our donation goal, the link is below, and I will also put it in the chat for you all.
And Libba, I also wanted to make our viewers aware that things being what they are, we are accepting sheets of plywood for donations now.
Yes.
Not to ask too much of our viewers, but we will take sheets of plywood. 2x4s are also acceptable. And if anyone has any gasoline in plastic bags, that might be we can enter that in the raffle as well.
We will also accept that as a raffle entry.
Absolutely.
Yes. We've got plenty of toilet paper at this point.
We do have toilet paper. That does not count as an entry at this point.
Not anymore.
Last year it did.
Yes, right. Of course, we kid. But,
I'll take some plywood.
Yeah, right.
If you have some to donate, you
just let us
bring
know.
that on down.
So, anyway, yes, please do. So, guys, we usually start off with, what are you wearing? So, let's start with Glen. Glen, let's start with you today. So, Glen, what are you wearing?
Well, I don't want to let anyone down, but I am portraying a British paratrooper.
Oh, a
you
British
get it?
paratrooper.
Let them down.
Oh, that's
parachute.
Good. It took an explanation, but
yeah.
Sometimes those are the best jokes, the ones you have to explain.
then I am the funniest person alive.
Yeah.
If that is the case. No, so the you have to remember that paratroopers, airborne troops, were very, very new in World War II. And the first nation to experiment with airborne troops was actually the Soviets. And they did not do very well. They lagged a little bit behind. They experimented with throwing people out of airplanes into deep snow as well as parachutes. It's the Soviets.
Yeah.
And they had people, they would get out of the plane and they would climb out. They put handrails on the wing so people could climb out onto the end of the wing and then let go, and then the parachutes could take them that way. Very experimental stuff.
Yeah.
And so then the British and the Germans both independently began to develop airborne troops, and they realized they were going to have specialist equipment for people who jump out of airplanes, right? There's the slipstream from the airplanes and just the type of equipment you have to use. They literally needed crash helmets that could serve as crash helmets as well as protective helmets. So you start to see the helmets with extra padding on the inside for such things. A big, bulky sort of overgarment that would kind of gather everything in the uniform and the equipment into one package underneath. When you go out on the airplane, it's all sort of contained. The Germans and the British adopted this. And it wasn't until, a little bit later that the Americans began to experiment with with paratroopers and glider troops. But the British were the first to sort of develop division-sized units, and then the Germans followed through. The Germans had the first combat uses of airborne troops. and the British quickly followed suit. And there for a while it was the British and the Germans doing things until the Americans decided to jump on in with that. So
nice.
So yes, this is believe it or not, British paratrooper was Glen's very first historic impression.
Really? Oh,
yes.
How long ago was that? Tell us. Was it for like a school group? Or
No,
like
this was actually. So I just had costume stuff.
Yeah.
Up until like college and Renfest and things, right, and stuff like that. I didn't have an actual. Getting the stuff that a person from history would wear as authentically as possible until my first job at the Atlanta History Center. So this must have been 1997.
Nice.
When I put the first real historic impression together.
Cute.
That's the year I was born.
Aw, you're old. Young at heart.
Young at heart.
So Marie, you're wearing something completely different.
Yes.
Tell us about your outfit today.
I am dressed to go to the beach as if it were 1900.
1900? Okay,
Yes.
nice. Turn of the century.
This is my bathing suit.
Nice.
It has a whole skirt.
What is the material made of? Is it just like...
So, traditionally, they would have been made of wool, like a light wool. This one's actually made of cotton because I was afraid of drowning. So
the wool would be so absorbent?
I was scared of that. But now I actually got some better gray wool that I think I'm going to make it out of again.
Oh, that's cool.
That would be neat.
This was my first one, so I just kind of was experimenting, and wool is also far more expensive than cotton for like your first experiment in making an outfit. So I ended up buying a bunch of wool for a different outfit, more than I actually needed for the project, as you do.
That's how you do it, yeah.
Because how am I, like, because once you buy for a project, if you don't have enough for the project and you go back and they don't have it, and then you're just stuck. So I always buy extra. And so I think I'm going to try to do an 1800 swimsuit out of gray wool.
Interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
like
That's
1860s.
really cool.
Because that's when bathing suits really begin to actually exist. Before then, why would you go to the seaside and actually swim?
Well,
People were scared of the water.
It was still a little weird in 1900,
It
right?
was, yes.
Yeah.
Going to the beach is not the holiday experience that it was today.
Or in 1944.
No.
Right.
Not that either.
Certain beaches.
Certain beaches anyway.
But for a very, very long time, humans have been scared of the water.
Right.
And the idea of sea creatures eating you, sailors just disappearing.
Jellyfish.
Yeah.
Still scared of those.
Yeah, still scared of those.
So people, for a very, very long time, it really wasn't until the 1860s when you see the first bathing suit come into fashion. And still swimming wasn't a thing. You kind of just go and you splash.
Yeah.
It's fun, right?
Dip your toes in the water.
You dip your toes in the water and you just kind of splash around. Swimming doesn't actually begin to take off like we think of swimming today until like the 1920s almost.
Oh, wow.
That's when you start seeing like swimming competitions and swimming the English Channel and things like that.
It was a new fad.
Yeah, swimming.
The hip, cool people are doing it, not just John Quincy Adams.
Yes,
Oh, really?
or Ben Franklin.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes,
they
they were two historic avid swimmers, and people thought they were odd. Swimming is odd. John Quincy Adams, as president, would dive himself naked into the Potomac at least every third day and go for a swim.
Oh,
John
you know
Quincy
what?
Adams.
Keeping healthy?
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Both of them did not use swimsuits.
No.
Those
There were no
still not
swimsuits.
invented, and trying to swim in normal clothes is hard.
Out of all the inventions, Ben Franklin, didn't think a swimsuit was necessary.
He already had one.
He already his flesh.
That's right.
Why? You already have one. Why make another?
Why reinvent the birthday suit?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
But the whole history of people going to the seaside is fascinating.
yeah, that sounds like yet another great idea for
Yeah.
a history program. So
Write it down.
I'm actually, I am.
Okay.
Hold on, because it's always too busy to clickety clackety.
People would go to the seaside for their health. To go just walk about and get the air, the fresh air.
Not to get wet.
Not
no.
to get wet, but just to
Yeah.
get the sun and the air. And
Yes.
All right, I've got
for your
history
health,
of swimming written
Still
down.
not swimming.
Well, we've already got some questions in the queue, and we also have our regulars here. Hello, Freed!
Hello!
Hey.
Great to see you, Freed, our friend from Germany. We've also got Susan, Alma, and Gabby is here. We've got Josh as well. Hey, Josh! All the regulars.
Yay!
And Susan's going to start us off with our first question of the day, and it is... Oh, and Wheelless Studios is here. Hey, on Twitch. Good to see you. And Barry. All the folks are coming in.
We were afraid you wouldn't make it since we took last week off.
Oh, yeah. So Susan asks, why is it that Governor Morris gets the shaft when it comes to writing the Constitution and Madison gets all the credit? Didn't Morris actually write the Constitution and Madison the Bill of Rights?
Oh. Yes and no. So, what makes James Madison the father of the Constitution is he went into the Constitutional Convention with a very well thought out and developed plan of how things should be, right? And what came out of the Constitutional Convention wasn't the plan he came in with. It was incredibly changed and modified, and so he sort of guided the discussions because he was the first one. They said, okay, what should we do? And he's like, oh, hey, here I have a plan. So since he had the plan, that became the basis of what everyone discussed, right? So rather than having 50 people come up with a different plan, they all decided to start with James Madison's starting point. Now, Gouverneur Morris was the man who sort of was not the opposite of Madison. I don't want to say he was the opposition, but anytime Madison had an idea, and if there was any difference of opinion about that idea, the opposition sort of began to center around Gouverneur Morris because people really respected him. He was a big guy. He was fairly wealthy at this time, and he had a really good reputation from what he had done for the country during the Revolution. Now, when they say that he wrote it, what happens is the Constitutional Convention, over the course of a couple of different months, adopted all these different ideas after much debate and discussion, and what they had was a big, long list of a series of motions where they adopted particular articles or particular ideas or particular phrasing. Gouverneur Morris is the one who actually had to sit down and convert this massive motions and amendments and things like that into a singular document.
He edited.
Yes, he edited and compiled, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's why they say he's the author of the Constitution. The wording, the writing, and everything is his. Now, of course, they changed it a little bit when they brought the document in its entirety to the body. But Gouverneur Morris, crafted, edited, combined, and literally wrote the Constitution. And then they left, and then the Bill of Rights is a sort of separate thing. When states began to consider ratification, a lot of people didn't like it because many people fought the American Revolution to secure their individual liberties and freedoms, not to establish a particular kind of government, if that makes sense. Yeah. And all the Constitution does is set up a system whereby a federal government operates, right? It's a guidebook. It's not necessarily a sacred set of ideals and motivations the way the Declaration of Independence is. The Constitution is just a guideline. And all it did was say, here are the powers that the large federal government has. And it did not remotely ever address the rights of the individual, which is when it goes for ratification. This was the main arguing point many people had against it. And then Madison did say, all right, well, you know what? We will come up with a list of amendments that if you ratify the Constitution, these are the amendments we'll add to it that recognize the individual liberties and rights, which is how we get the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. So they did develop separately, but they came together in the end because that was so central to the ratification process. And sometimes we all know what the First Amendment, the Second Amendment is. Sometimes we know what the Fifth is because people will plead the Fifth. We don't get too riled up about housing soldiers anymore.
That is third.
That is third. Right to privacy and search and seizure and things like that. Fourth is very important. But then you get to the 9th and the 10th, and these are the ones, if I may get on a political soapbox for just a moment, the ones that we seem to have ignored and gone by the wayside. Of course, the 9th Amendment says that this list in the Bill of Rights is not the only ones. There are other rights that exist. They are simply not enumerated in this list. And then, of course, the 10th Amendment says any rights and liberties not granted to the federal government belong to the states individual or to the people. But again, the federal government here in 2021 has absorbed so many of those responsibilities for a lot of different reasons, some legitimate, some not, depending upon how you see it, that the 9th and the 10th have sort of gone by the wayside. And I think that, more than anything else, would make Gouverneur Morris and Madison together spin in their respective tombs. That's just me. Did that answer your question?
I think it did. So, now, I noticed, so it's not Governor Morris. You're saying
I'm saying it's Gouverneur.
Yeah, I noticed it's spelled differently too.
It's that New England thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean it is. The Gouverneur Morris.
Yeah. So he deserves a fair amount.
He deserves a good amount of due and credit.
His respect. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan. That was a great question. It also leads me to think that just a program on the Bill of Rights and each of those amendments would be really enlightening too.
Yeah, I force when I teach class, I force all my students to basically. All 10 amendments are on the test.
Yeah.
Right? And they've got to they don't have to word for word, but they've got to tell me what each one's about.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Gabby and Alma from California. And Gabby wants to know about the Musical Newsies. I like that musical too, Gabby. She wants to know, could there really have been a woman reporter? How did the newsboys live? And were there any newsy girls? So, Marie, do you want to take it away?
Yes, all right. So for people who do not know what the Musical Newsies is, I will already confess that I have not seen the musical in its entirety. It's on my list of things to do, but I do know about it. So, Newsies. It basically follows newsboys. Boys who, are selling papers.
Yes.
Or standing on, at this point, they're in New York, you stand on a corner, yell, extra, extra, read all about it. This is the headline, come grab it. So it follows these boys predominantly. Of course, when you have newspapers, you have also reporters and people who buy newspapers and the whole community that surrounds that. So I believe Newsies is set in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
New York, I believe, as well.
I think it's New York.
It's New York. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Good. So, could there have been a female reporter? Possibly. Probably. Yeah.
Would have been incredibly
rare.
Yes, it would have been something to talk about.
And it also would have been, well, what is she reporting on? Because you might have a woman who writes for the paper anonymously as like a Dear Abby kind of situation. Or a lady might send in a letter to the editor and it gets published. Would you call her a reporter? I mean, she got something published in the paper. Mm-hmm. Or the social columns, which were a huge deal about who went to what party, who wore what. Could that have been a lady? Possibly. So more gender specific things a lady could have possibly gotten her foot in the door that way. Still would have been incredibly rare for a woman of that time in the early 1900s to, be a reporter. Of course, then you get to the 1920s and you definitely have women reporters. You have Margaret Mitchell, who wrote Gone with the Wind. She was a reporter for the Atlanta Journal before it merged with the Constitution, became the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So,
and she's not just doing, look at all the new dishes that came out at Macy's this week. She's doing real stories.
She's rappelling down buildings and talking to inmates on death row, and she is out there doing hard-hitting stories, investigative journalism. It's not just what you would call, unquote, gendered lady things. It's everything. The door had been busted wide open, and she was walking right through it. Was that still kind of rare in the 1920s? Yeah, a little bit, but it was more acceptable and a actual a thing that women would do. In Downton Abbey, even Edith, one of the Crawley sisters, begins to edit a paper and becomes an editor, but that's also in the 1920s. So I think for Newsies is a little ahead of its time if it to include a lady reporter if it does, but not out of. There's always rules to the historical exception, right? There's always exceptions to the rule.
I think in Newsies, now that I'm remembering the story correctly, that she is the daughter of the man who owns the
publisher,
newspaper. Yeah. So, there's also that, you can kind of stretch belief a little bit,
yes.
But yeah, so that's a great question, Gabby.
Yeah.
So she would have been someone that was outside of the norm for sure. And as far as having newsy girls, I don't know if that would have been
not so much.
No,
not really.
Yeah, you're not going to find newsy girls. Yeah,
it's pretty much a little boy thing.
Yeah. But it's funny. I've only seen this once because my oldest and dearest friend, of all the musicals that exist, this is his favorite one in history.
Oh, really?
So, # Shannon DeWitt, if you're watching. I did mention
really
you for
fun.
Newsies. Yeah.
and it does actually surround a actual strike in 1899.
It's based on historical events, yes.
Yeah. So it's a fun one to check out. Lots of great music, and I think it can at least pique your interest in that what actually happened surrounding the strike, and just the history behind strike movements, especially once we get a little bit later into the Industrial Revolution. Really fascinating history, Gabby and Alma. So you might want to read up on that as well. Well, thank you so much for your question, Gabby, all the way from California. Freed, going back to swimming, is wondering, when did people actually develop the swimming styles we know today? Now, this is a pretty specific question, but when it's coming to like freestyle, butterfly, breaststroke, backstroke.
I have no idea.
I would imagine that it would come about, though.
I feel like it would come about gradually if it did.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the doggy paddle is definitely the oldest one.
Yeah.
That's what dogs do. We just imitate.
Yeah, I'd honestly, people in the ancient world swam. I just don't. I have no idea. Maybe someone has done research on that. Now we're gonna have to go look it up.
It's true.
You know what? Yeah. Thank you, Britannica, because Britannica is actually saying that the earliest strokes to be used were the side stroke and the breaststroke.
Not the doggy paddle.
And doggy paddles probably.
Talking, yeah.
Oh, like human
like
ones.
official.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. But it's saying that the practice was modified toward the end of the 19th century by bringing forward first one arm above the water, then the other. So I guess freestyle we can at least say, which is just what you think of as regular swimming strokes. Right. It's going to come around the end of the 19th century apparently. So. Good question.
Interesting.
Good topic to look up as well. All right, let's see what's next. We've also got Phil here. Hey, Phil. Good to see you. And Amy Beaucham. Hello. So Susan is also wondering, could you please explain the Treaty of, Tordesillas? Let me put it up on the screen because I'm terrible. Let's see. The Treaty of Tordesillas. Let me see here. Let's see. This was in Spain in 1494.
Is this the one where Spain and Portugal divided the world up?
Yes.
Along a particular longitude?
Yes. Along
Not
meridian.
a longitude. I don't know that much, but yeah. So it was sort of a height of arrogance thing, right? That the Spain had sent folks to the New World, and then Portugal had also done it. And it's important to remember, it seems that Portugal is just a small part of the Iberian Peninsula, so we don't think about it as important as Spain. But in this time period, it was hugely influential and powerful, not because of its size, but because of its trade routes. And and money, and the crown of Portugal had invested heavily in in ships, in navigation, in astronomy and things like that, so that because this is the time period when navigation is the key. Good ships and navigation are how you get where you want to go quickly and efficiently and reliably. So they had invested in this, which had made Portuguese traders some of the most successful in the entire world. So they began going to the New World almost the exact same time as the Spanish. The Spanish only beat them by, it was less than a year. We're talking, several months. And so they're like, okay, so that us two great powers don't go to war, let's talk about how we're going to divide up this new place that we just found. So they set the meridian. I can't remember exactly what the meridian is. And we'll have everything on this side. Portugal can have everything on this side. Spain can have everything on this side. And everyone will be happy. And it basically just, postponed war between them, which is why, Portugal had very much heavily colonized in South America, around what's now Brazil and places like that, which is why Brazil speaks Portuguese, right? And the rest of South America speaks Spanish, but that very significant part of South America that's Brazil still has those Portuguese roots. But honestly, that's all I know about the treaty itself. I don't know, who the main players were, who signed it, what the negotiations were, or anything like that.
Oh, it looks like Phil also mentioned that the treaty was featured in the De Niro movie The Mission. Apparently, that's interesting.
Oh, that's right. They were going to kind of figure that out and see who they could, where the line was going to be, which side the tribes were going to be on, how they were going to have those relations and things like that. So
yeah, I put a link to a Britannica article in case you're interested in learning a little bit more about that. But that sounds fascinating. So let's see, we've got, let's go to Josh's question on YouTube. Good, it's a what if. We love what ifs. So Josh asks, what would have happened if George Washington accepted the proposal to become king? What would have happened from then till now? Let's speculate. Now, first of all, George Washington was offered the role of king? What's this?
Yes. People talked about it. You have to remember that every Western government at this time, without exception, was a monarchy, except for a few very small Dutch areas and in the Netherlands. That's it.
That's the form of government.
Yeah, which means it's worked for centuries. It provides stability, it provides leadership, it provides consensus and unity of cause and action. So when people were thinking about, well, once we gain independence, what's our country going to look like? Aren't we going to need a king? And several people thought, yes, we are, because they had a failure of imagination.
Because, well, what you do when you have a bad king? You get a new king, right?
Or you cope until he dies. Yeah.
It happens. Get a regent.
Yeah. So.
But America thought outside the box.
Yes, but for the Newburgh conspiracy, at Newburgh, just as they were, it looked like they were going to succeed in beating the British and getting their independence. There was a cabal of American officers who were like, Congress is dilly-dallying. They've never supported us. They're going to take this country into ruin. We're going to get Washington to march at the head of his army, dissolve Congress, and become king and rule the country. That's how we're going forward. And Washington, just in a simple speech, quashed that flat.
Wow.
Right? So what would happen, though, if he had changed his mind? I don't think America would have made it, because what kings traditionally are succession, right? They are blood succession, they're bloodline.
And when George Washington does not have any legitimate children of his own, he has two adopted children. I guess you could say perhaps that counts.
Well, if history shows us anything, it shows us that jealous and ambitious people will do away with appointed heirs, not of the blood. The powerful and ambitious other leaders of the country are going to go to war with each other to see who comes out on top. that has happened time and again, time immemorial, going back beyond the ancient Greeks, and so that's probably what would have happened if a kingdom had tried to be established. Not so much because Washington would have failed at being king. Washington would have held it together until his death. And at his death, everything would have come apart, and eventually the only way that would have rectified itself is for one of the strong men to have come out on top. And when a strong man comes out on top, he is not ready to relinquish power to an elected body. Congress, the idea of a republic would have ceased to exist. That would have been that. That's my opinion, Josh.
I think that makes sense.
If everyone got along, though, it could have been his adopted son, and then it would be his children.
Wow.
And going down.
Yeah.
No way.
I have an idealistic view of humanity sometimes.
If
so
everyone
just got along and decided George Washington should be king, it would have been.
But then history might be so boring.
It would be definitely boring, perhaps.
Your boy Alexander Hamilton would have been one of the faction leaders. There's no question.
I also have other conspiracy theory of like if we had actually gone monarchy route.
Yeah.
What would it have happened? We could have just had little principalities. All the little colonies could have gotten their own little king. That's probably what would happen when Washington died. Why take over everything when you could just have your own state?
This is true.
And then have a bunch of little nations. And then eventually one of them would rise up and try to take over all the other ones.
Unless the Europeans came in and took them up piecemeal.
That's true. Yeah. Britain was ready to come back and take us in the War of 1812.
The only reason they didn't because we had a unified national government. If it had been 13 or 14 little statelets, pop, 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 pop.
Yeah.
Actually, not pop, 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 just pop, 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 and leave the other 10 because they're small and insignificant. You only want 2 or 3 of the big ones, right? You get New York, you get Pennsylvania, you get Virginia, maybe South Carolina, you're done.
Yeah.
Who cares about the rest of them? They're not going to make you money.
I see.
Or you did have Savannah.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's not compared to Charleston.
In 1800, we were like this big. We still had the smallest population. We weren't making money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, Josh. Another long-winded what if. I hope that was entertaining.
Can you get a long-winded what if?
Yeah, right. Oh my
logo that goes across the screen? That would be great.
Yes, I'm on it. Now, Carol has an interesting question. Were all of the founding fathers born in the colonies?
No.
So talk to us about which of them were, or were most of them born outside of the colonies since the nation was so young?
Well, let's define founding fathers.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess we mean the leaders who took an active role in the Second Continental Congress, or in the Constitutional Convention, or perhaps in the very first days of the government under the Constitution. Is that a fair definition?
I think that's fair.
Yeah. Which is that's probably 200 to 300 people.
Oh wow!
Really
yeah, right.
So
when you start bringing all those folks together like
Let's
that.
do everyone that has a statue in Washington D.C.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
That'll make it.
Washington was native born. Jefferson was native born. Adams was native born. Franklin was native born. Hamilton was not.
He was born in the Bahamas.
Yes.
And then had to scrounge up money to come over.
Yes. Gouverneur Morris, I think, was born in England.
James Madison.
I think he was native born.
He was here.
Yeah, I guess we're sort of underwhelming our say. No, not all of them were. The big ones were born in North America, but not everyone.
Yeah.
They tended to, they tended to be born here, being tied to the land, especially generationally, did influence those who were more concerned about America's well-being than Great Britain's well-being. But there were some who were born abroad who still believed in the American cause.
Well, there you have it. So, the majority of them.
The majority, yeah.
Yeah, good question, Carol.
One of the reasons why in the Constitution there's the clause that I think there is perhaps a favoritism towards people who were born in America, because the Constitution does say like you have to be born in America to be president, but it does say you either have to be born in America going forward, or you have to be in the country at the time of the ratification of the Constitution.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So like Hamilton could have been president.
Yeah.
Until he like ruined his chances, but could have been. Electability, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Barry Whitmore mentions that Hamilton wanted a king-like figure, which...
that was one of Hamilton's ideas.
Yes.
Well.
Yes. He gave the only time he gave a significant speech at the Constitutional Convention, I think, was like an hour and a half, 2-3 hour diatribe on why it should be a monarchy.
Wow.
And then he sat down, and he's not in Madison's notes anymore after that, really.
Lost favoritism there.
Everyone wanted him to, I think, be quiet.
Okay, Alex.
Sure.
Okay. What's next on the docket?
Yeah. Let's see. Gabby says, heads up, Marie, because... let's see. She's going to watch Hairspray next.
Oh,
the musical Hairspray.
I have seen Hairspray.
Yeah,
okay.
and we'll probably
Very
have
good.
a question about that when she watches it. I like Hairspray too. That's a really fun musical. And let's see. So, moving on. Terry asks, "Hello, Terry. Good to see you again. How did Lafayette help the colonies win?" So, backtrack. Who is Lafayette?
This gives a great opportunity for me to use my outrageous French accent, which
Terry.
these two ladies have already
Yeah.
spoken very ill of before.
Yes.
So Lafayette was a member of the French aristocracy, and many of the lesser nobility of Europe were taken by the adventure and ideological freshness of what the American ideal was going to be, and so that coupled with the traditional hatred of Great Britain,
and the Enlightenment ideals that had very much taken hold in France.
Yes.
That also inspired America.
Right.
Yeah.
So these people
everything.
come over to help fight for the independence of these new 13 colonies trying to create a single nation. And Lafayette was one of those. Lafayette was probably, from a social point of view, the highest ranked aristocracy member who came to help with this. And so, number one, he granted a significant amount of prestige to the American cause.
It's kind of like when you get someone that has a big name to like join your group, and you're like, "See, look, they said we're good. You should." And it's an endorsement.
They're famous, Kazushko and Pulaski, two Polish, not quite, Pulaski was a count, wasn't he? And I think Kazushko might have been too. Two Polish counts came over. We've of course got von Steuben, who we call Baron, but as it turns out, he sort of promoted himself when he came over and wasn't actually a baron, and I don't think was of any significant aristocracy whatsoever. But if the name sticks, right, it worked. He knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, really.
So Lafayette he was a competent soldier. There's no question. But he had these qualities that Washington absolutely loved. They endeared him to a young Lafayette. And Washington, as you've already said, not having a son of his own, a blood son of his own, sort of saw in Lafayette this foster son, the son he never had, but he would have always wanted, with these qualities and this exuberance and this youth and this yearning for leadership and recognition. And so that, coupled with Lafayette's actual abilities and talents, coupled with the prestige of having someone from the French aristocracy come over, does lend a great amount of oomph to the American cause, especially when Franklin's over in Paris trying to get the French to throw in with us, recognize American independence, provide money and troops and ships to the American cause. He can say, look, some of your greatest and noblest sons of France have already joined us, but you should just come along with them. You should be leading the way, Your Majesty, not these insignificant marquises. But yes, Lafayette's an interesting character.
So he helped. He helped in
he helped
absolutely.
A lot with military tactics and just unification.
Yes.
looking up to someone having a strong leadership role.
Yeah, he's classic, very young when he comes over, and his prestigious title sort of at first puts Washington in an awkward place because he does need the support that Lafayette's going to lend the cause, but you can't just give some new guy, 5,000 men to lead on the battlefield if it looks like they don't know what they're doing. So he's sort of caught. And so he does he gives Lafayette somewhat small commands, and quite frankly, Lafayette doesn't do a good job in his first attempts to lead men in battle. But here's the thing, he picks up quickly.
Yeah.
Right? He's a quick study, he learns from his mistakes, and he learns from the people who are better at it than him, like Washington, like Greene, and folks like that. So by the time you get to the Yorktown campaign, Lafayette has legitimately become one of Washington's go-to battlefield commanders.
Yeah.
Right? He's in charge of an entire division, and it's the one Washington starts to feed the most important jobs to.
Very cool. Yeah, so he took it seriously, actually learned a thing or two, proved himself. Yeah, that's a really cool story. So, thank you, Terry. That was a great question. Freed says, can't decide if Glen's French accent is worse than his German accent, but I will say that it was a perfect imitation of an American trying to make a French accent. We agree.
Merci and bitte.
Yeah, right. Now, let's see. We got another what if from Josh. So,
All right.
If Spain refused Columbus like Portugal did, and he then went to France and they refused, then if he went to England and they accepted, what would have happened? Whew, these are getting complex.
They are getting complex.
But yeah, so if Columbus actually was, well, what's the right word? Not chartered by. But
so funded. They backed him, right?
Yeah.
Things would have progressed very differently simply because of geography, I think. Yeah. So when Spain supports you in your efforts, the most direct route across the Atlantic is sort of that southern part, right? Which is how he ends up in Hispaniola and the San Salvador and San Salvador and those areas, right? And which puts them closer to Mexico and the Aztecs, where all that gold and silver is.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is the first and earliest part of history between North America and Europe. If he had to go all the way up to England to get his backing, he's possibly, and remember, this is guess, so you can't tell me I'm wrong, probably would not have come down and gone that way. He probably would have taken that northerly route that goes along Greenland and Iceland and probably would have landed in Newfoundland and made his way down that way. That being the case, North America's contact with Europeans is going to be very, very different in the terms of what the resources are that are first encountered, what the types of Native American cultures and societies. Honestly, the northeastern North America Native American cultures were not nearly as complex and advanced as those in Central America were.
They also don't have as much gold.
They don't have gold and silver. They hunt and
or
they have
rubies.
furs and things like they don't have those things. So Columbus is going to go, this is not as profitable as I thought it was going to be, right? Instead of untold wealth.
Cities of gold.
They're not going to hear about that. They're going to hear about, there's some really good beaver at this dam in the creek. You should try those.
Yeah.
Well, fur trade it got really popular.
Well, it got, but it's still
not what he was looking for.
It ain't what he's looking for, right? He's looking for a route to the east. So, maybe a pure speculation that maybe that's how it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. He might have gone ahead and come down. And tried to take that southerly route as he would have from Spain anyway. But that, from an English perspective, is going to add a lot of tenuous communication line, let's say, between those two areas. That that's not going to be as beneficial as it was for Spain.
Or if we play the card of, if he went the same route and the same things happened, but it basically, England gets all that wealth instead of Spain, you have a new power earlier
right
in Europe. You have England having all of that wealth in the 1400s, where in the 1400s, England wasn't really a superpower at all.
Nope.
It was not until later when they got more colonial power that they became bigger and had the whole,
that probably means there
British Empire.
Yeah.
And there would have been no Henry VIII crazy times, right? Because
you had that much wealth.
Henry
VII
was still king in 1490s. Isn't that right?
I think so.
So,
right.
Henry VII was much more savvy and thinky than his son was, in my opinion. So yeah, things, if that happens, if they do start to get that kind of wealth, England is going to become a very different, very powerful thing.
Yes,
and in terms of trade, in terms of politics, in terms of influence. And there may not be, part of the reason the Reformation was able to keep going is because England got powerful just at the time it began supporting the Reformation. If the Reformation hadn't gotten that much support from England, and England was instead
very Catholic.
Very Catholic.
And Spain also were kind of like lottery winners who didn't know what to do with their money. And they didn't play the cards right to where they were able to keep their wealth and power for long. In England, if you have this good king, and he stays around for a while and sets it up to where they might have been able to hold on to it, the wealth and power longer.
Right.
It would be a whole different ball game in Europe for religion, politics, expansion, all of it.
Good question, Josh. It leads to a lot of interesting topics, though. It does.
Yeah.
And Freed also mentioned. So what you're saying is Vinland, Renaissance of the United Viking Nations.
Yes, exactly.
And that Freed is going to write a novel about that. I hope that you're being serious, because
that would be cool. We'll only ask for 3% of the net proceeds.
Only 3%.
Only 3%.
Josh is also wondering what would have happened to John Cabot. My additional question. That name sounds familiar, but I don't know who that is off the top of my head. John Cabot.
He was one of the early explorers of.
An Italian navigator and explorer. Okay, so he was commissioned by Henry VII of England.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is the earliest known European exploration of coastal North America.
Right.
Since the Norse visits to Vinland in the
because he was all up in the St. Lawrence kind of, and I don't know. Honestly, you're right, Josh. That route may have been what the English did, and they would have. Here's the thing. The English were relative latecomers to that whole colonizing and exploiting the New World thing, right? Spain and Portugal had already gotten and based their entire colonization upon precious metal extraction, right? Gold and silver. And they were not letting France or England or Italy anywhere near that stuff, which is why France and England had to settle a little further into the Americas, into North America, and they began taking a very different approaches to how they were colonizing those areas, right? The French began with the fur trade. Like you said, the fur trade picks up. The French realizes this is an incredibly lucrative practice. And so much of, the first 100+ years of French colonization is focused not around colonization per se, but setting up trading posts to extract the wealth in terms of the fur trade. And then the English, again, get there pretty late, right, in terms of significant efforts to colonize. And so when they get there, most of course, they all go in looking for gold and silver, because that's the way Spain did it. That's the way they'd like to do it. There's not really any there. And they begin to realize that to extract wealth from the New World and send it back home, we're going to have to use the old-fashioned agricultural means. They start off with tobacco, again, crops built around profit. But when you begin trading posts, you can man with just a few people and ships to take the fur back. Gold and silver, you can have small areas to mine it and then send it back. But for an agriculturally based wealth extraction, you need people and you need land, which means the English are the ones who start to set up getting the land and getting more and more people to North America. In the end, that's what wins them the continent, because by the time you get to the French and Indian War, there are 2.5 million. Well, yeah, about 2.5 million British people in North America, and there's 60,000 French, right? From sheer demographics, the British have now become the most populous people in North America because of that late catch-up, seemingly not very good colonization practice. Turns out that's what gets them the continent in the end. They didn't plan it that way, but that's the way it turned out.
Yeah. Fascinating. Thank you, Josh, for taking us on that journey. So, let's see. We don't have any other questions in the chat, and we've only got about 10 or so minutes left. So if there's any last questions you would like to ask Marie and Glenn, do you get those in the chat? I have one for you, Marie, that I've been wondering. I thought it would be fun to talk about. What old-fashioned accessories do you wish would make a comeback? Oh. I thought maybe we at the History Center could be the ones to bring back the... What do you think?
And sell it in the shop.
Yeah, there you go.
I think
now you're thinking.
I think just all sorts of hats.
Hats, yeah.
I feel like we just don't make use of fun hats.
Now, is there a particular era of hats that you really, really like?
I like 1950s hats.
1950s
like
hats?
The little hats, like the little ladies wear. I think those are fun. I also think like big, like 1900s hats, like the giant hats with like flowers and feathers, also very fun. I also just really like bonnets.
Yeah.
Like a good 1800s bonnet, I think is fun. I really wish that sun hats, like the giant ones from the 1700s, would just make a comeback as sun hats.
Sun hats?
You know, that's
some good ones.
All right.
That's
like,
a really good point.
Yeah.
Because today we're more open about fashion, just walking down the street.
Yeah.
All the things you've mentioned, I think people would go, huh?
Yeah.
50s pillbox hats, the big things, except for, unfortunately, if you wore a split bonnet on the square in Gainesville, people would think, they wouldn't say, wow, that's interesting. They'd say, that girl is a freak.
Yes. Everything else, I think I could pull off.
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with you personally.
No, people don't like bonnets.
They do not like bonnets, which is
I
too
think
bad.
they're fun.
And they're practical.
They are.
They keep the sun off. They're comfortable. They kind of keep you...
Yeah.
Now tell me, does this one count? I'm gonna throw some images in. Does this count as? Oh, that's so big. As a bonnet. Is this what we're talking about?
No, that is a cap.
Okay, so this is a cap.
Yes, that is going to be a 1700s cap.
All right, I'm gonna find a bonnet, but I also
those
found
are also
some,
fun. They're not as practical.
Like
though.
are these the
These
pillbox?
are cute.
What are you talking about? What are these called? These are cute though.
They're very cute. I don't think any of these have the closest one would be B down there, would be closest to the pillbox style of a hat, but I wouldn't I'm not sure if I would exactly classify that as a pillbox.
And then I also found
it needs to be a little smaller.
These fancy ladies got some.
Those are also fun.
Some very, very big hats.
Those are giant caps.
Almost looks like what is called the Mad Hatter.
Yes, that lady over there looks like the Mad Hatter. She's just going for it.
Yeah, so let me look up pillbox hat.
Yes. But we just I think we talked about it at one LoFi history, how hats just are no longer with us because Kennedy killed them.
Thanks, Kennedy.
Yeah.
Well, men's
hats. Ladies' hats still, because see, there we go. This way.
Whoop, there we go.
There we are.
Yeah.
See, so this is probably the most famous little pillbox hat ever.
So
that Jacqueline Kennedy is wearing there, her pink suit, which is incredibly famous, as she wore that on the day of her husband's assassination, and then continued to wear it with his bloodstains as Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in on Air Force One.
Oof, that's a statement. Yeah.
They said, would you like to change? And she said no.
Yeah. Freed says, make walking sticks fashionable again. So I guess walking canes.
Yes.
Yes.
Now Now we always think of canes as for people with who need it for medical use or assistance, but they're also like they used to be just a fashion, like a fashion
people
accessory.
For hundreds of years, right?
Yes.
You didn't go out without one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Men and ladies.
Or
ladies, not so much in the 1800s. That became more of a man thing. But in the 1700s, a lady could have a walking.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And maybe like a wizard staff too.
Bring
capes.
back wizard staff.
Capes.
Capes.
I want capes.
Yes. Capes.
Now, when were capes like the height of fashion? I mean, when were they more like practical?
Now you mean cloak, like everything.
Like
cloaks, cloaks, capes, anything.
Like cloak capes.
Anything that drapes over your shoulders.
Very
you can pull
billowy.
up the hood. Yes.
With the hood. The billowy with the hood, that is going to be mostly 1700s.
But people have been wearing cloaks for
forever.
Literally. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Throw a sheet on.
They wore cloaks.
Get a blanket.
In some way, form, or fashion until the early 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
Even I know
they got shorter and longer as fashion dictated.
Right.
Victorian caplettes were very a thing for ladies. Men could still wear a cloak. They wouldn't be as long though. They're going to get shorter and shorter.
And they started to move more towards the greatcoat jacket with sleeves, not the cloak.
But they would still have a caplet over the greatcoat.
Yes.
But then they just kind of disappeared.
So I think this was titled as Regency. Oh no, this is the 1800s cloak. So I guess this would sort of be near the end of wearing the cloak.
This is like one of the last times of long billowy cloaks.
Yeah, so this is 1823. Mm-hmm. So bring back hats, bring back cloaks. Yes. Love it.
Wizard staffs.
Wizard staffs.
We're eventually moving towards Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, right. Basically.
We're going for a high fantasy aesthetic.
Yes.
I just want to wear a tiara in public and people not think I'm crazy too.
Oh, you could get away with that before you could get away with a split bonnet.
I really could.
Yeah. Okay, wait, hold on. What is this split bonnet specifically?
Think Laura Ingalls Wilder, right?
Oh, okay.
The frontier women's wear.
Oh, yeah. So
I could wear a spoon bonnet.
A spoon bonnet?
It looks
so
like
is that a good example of a split bonnet?
Yeah. Or a slat bonnet.
Yeah,
sometimes they're called.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, remarkably,
very
practical.
Kind of like got blinders.
Kind of easy to make, right?
Oh, they are easy to make. Yeah. I made a bunch of them.
All right, so it looks like we are near the end of our time, and Josh has one more what if for us. So Josh asks, what would have happened if Alexander the Great survived? He planned to conquer Arabia and the west parts of Europe and Africa. Would he have succeeded or overwhelmed himself?
Things always do have tendency to get too big and then just kind of crumble.
I'm going to go with overwhelmed himself. Yeah. I think, not to be morbid about it, but I think he died at the right time. Right? I mean, he goes out on top, right? He's conquered the world, or at least the known world, more or less. And if he had, everything would have split up eventually. In his older years, or when he died, then it would have split up anyway, even with an heir. So I think beware overreach, right? We're talking hubris and nemesis here.
So there you have it, Josh. And I am going to try to actually remember a what if graphic because that's too good. We're going to get what ifs.
We may have to start an entire new show
called
What If with Josh.
Yeah, right? Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I did want to remind everyone of our raffle. So if you would like to enter our raffle, all you got to do is donate at least $5. And every $5 you donate will enter you into the raffle. We're going to announce the winner on June 1st. So you got to enter by the end of May. And all of the donations, of course, go toward continuing our programming. And we totally appreciate you being here. Even if you can't donate, we appreciate you being here and showing your support that way. Yeah. So we will be back on not next Tuesday, but the next. So that is going to be June 1st. We're going to start June off with a LoFi history. So we will see you June 1st. Thanks so much, everybody, for hanging out today. Yeah. See you then.
Bye, guys.